Hello everybody. I'm going to do a video on avoidance strategies, self-pacifying strategies you might want to call it, ways of maintaining a comfortable delusion. And I'm going to try and keep it as quick as I can, and I'm going to keep it as upbeat as I can. But it's a difficult subject. It's a difficult subject because it impinges upon addictions. It impinges upon flaws, let's call them, in culture. We can stretch it down as far as the entire basis of capitalism if we go far enough. But I do think that there is a solution. So at least let me start on an upbeat moment that I think there is a solution, which lies within, which is cost-free. And I'm bringing my most vivacious sense of kindness and love to this subject that I possibly can. So the reason I'm doing this, in actual fact, is because a little while ago I came back from Las Vegas, and I still have mixed feelings about it. So I'm kind of doing the video as a sort of a quasi self-therapeutic approach, because I felt so powerless, so overwhelmed by a situation so massive that it made me hurt. So I don't know, doing this video, I'm kind of hoping that there might be a way to make the world a better place, person by person, one by one, so that we can heal. Anyway, so let me stick to the subject. So Las Vegas. So I'm at this wonderful convention, Hypnosis convention, absolutely fantastic. Imagine being in a room with hundreds and hundreds of fascinating individuals who are kind and open-minded and thought-provoking, and you can learn a lot, and you feel like you've just come home. Brilliant, brilliant environment. Something I've been looking forward to for months. And it's held in this gleaming casino where everything works. It's all new, glitzy. But literally outside of the door, for me, it was heartbreaking. There is no other way to describe it. The pain on the doorstep, the abandonment, the trauma on display, the schism in reality was just. It caused a fracture inside of myself. I didn't know how to deal with it. I feel guilty for not being one of them, sort of thing. It was very, very painful. For not acting, for not yelling out and grabbing people by the shoulders and saying, "Do you not see what I see?" I felt complicit. And I'm sure that's a very useful feeling. So, I'm kind of doing this because I felt so powerless under the weight of this massive, massive problem. And I don't live in America, so, I'm not habituated to seeing that. But we're talking about literally on the doorstep, people overdosing, a homeless epidemic, a mental health epidemic, in temperatures of 45 degrees C, nearly 120 degrees Fahrenheit. There are people whose whole life revolves around moving from one side of the street to the other so that they avoid the direct sunlight, even though they're living in an oven. It's impossible for me to express my true feelings on it because it's just so hard. Words don't do it. Because then I'm going back inside the gleaming casino with a bouncer on the door pretending not to be there but making sure that reality doesn't come inside the casino. so that people can fritter away their money on machines with gaudy buttons and flashing lights and happy music and great pop music in the background and gleaming golden doors. So there's people outside pacifying with noxious, addictive, dreadful substances to the point where they are motionless. Who knows, maybe just kind of dehydrating in the sun. And there's people inside the casino pacifying, avoiding, pressing gaudy buttons. And I felt so helpless because it's massive. But this is the thing with these avoidance strategies. This is a cultural phenomena. There are different levels. There is a spectrum. Your Instagram likes, internet shopping, TV, self-help videos. Pornography, addictions. Fake bravado. Identifying with particular pop cultures. Self-selecting the news that you find palatable and pretending that the news that you don't is simply untrue. We all we all kind of find our drug of choice, right? The one that works for us, that allows us to maintain a level of pain that we can tolerate. Let's say that, right? Which is so pessimistic. And I hate to be pessimistic. But the thing is, none of these addictive strategies work, okay? None of these avoidance strategies work. It's hard to get enough of something that doesn't work. It doesn't matter how many shiny things you buy, it doesn't solve the pain in your heart. But if you buy another, maybe for a brief split second, or maybe for the anticipation of obtaining it, you kind of forget about the thing that you're trying to avoid. So we're all brilliant at finding ways to avoid reality. And maybe my trip to Las Vegas was just so painful because it was so in my face. It was so large. I could not square the circle, and it overwhelmed me. And I was there for a reason. I wanted to get the best out of the reason that I'd been there. And so I was kind of yo-yoing from one end of the emotional spectrum to the other. And I asked other people, did they see what I saw? And a lot of them didn't see it. A lot of them didn't see it at all. Some of them simply didn't go outside the casino, which says a lot in itself, right? That's a choice. Others did go outside the casino but didn't see what I saw. Others did, but decided that those people had made a choice, they had made their rational choice, and so it was none of their business, or that it was annoying, but out of their control. We all have this story running inside of our head. I don't know any of those people, so I cannot generalize. I haven't a clue. But I do know that people can come to choices that are very bad for them if the alternative choice is even worse, okay? There are people in some very, very traumatic experiences that will make a choice which to a stranger, to an outsider, might appear to make no sense at all. But to them make sense because their alternatives were even worse in their perception. when I was when I was in the convention, there's a lady there who gave a little speech, which I really kind of like, and I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her name, but it was all very positive. She's called Karen Han. She's a hypnotherapist as well, and she's very good at delivering these little experiences which are highly illuminating, let's say. So I'm gonna give you one of her experiences, and it's dead quick, but I find it quite illuminating about avoidance strategies. And her conclusion was different to my conclusion, which is even more fascinating. So all she said, and I encourage you now to go along with what I experienced. She said, okay, so just look around where you are. So look around now, wherever you are, wherever you're watching my video. Have a look around and see if you can find all of the colour blue. Have a look wherever you are. You can kind of swivel through 360 degrees and identify all of the blue that you can find. Just 5 or 10 seconds. Okay, that's good enough. Now what I'd like you to do is look around the wherever you are again a second time, and this time find all of the colour red that you can identify. Again, just for 5 or 10 seconds. Okay. Let's do it one more time for good measure. Okay, have a good look around wherever you are. See if you can find all of the yellow. Okay. That's done with a silly little game. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just a playful experience. So just walk through the experience, how it occurred to you. If you're like me, what happened is, it's like, okay, so find the blue. So you start to look around, and you notice individual things, and your focus kind of drills in, and you go one by one. You kind of itemize a list of, oh yeah, there's some blue, there's some blue, there's some blue, there's some blue. And then I said, okay, so see if you can find the red. So you look around, and you find all the red individually, zooming in. Now my question to you is, when you were looking for the red, what happened to the blue? And similarly, when you were looking for the yellow, what happened to the red? And if you're like me, what happened was you ignored it. You kind of unsaw it. It was no longer relevant. So you kind of hallucinated it away. Now, her conclusion to this was, so be really, really careful what you're looking for. Our brain is a goal-driven mechanism. Whatever you look for, you will find. Okay? And yeah, that's a very useful thing, okay? But there's another side to it as well, right? It's like, be aware of what it is that you're not seeing. Because these people in the casino, they weren't seeing what I was seeing. Even though their eyes must have received the same information. Which means that there's a part of me which either related to that or needed to see it, or wasn't adept at screening it out. You know, I'm not from that part of the world, so therefore I'm not habituated to screening it out. Maybe these other people I was talking to were. But when you're presented with something which is unsolvable, massive, right? Overwhelmingly complicated. I mean, my sensation when I saw all of this was a sense of complete powerlessness. Hurt and pain and sadness, but frustrating powerlessness. you kind of deal with it by screening it off, right? That's kind of how you continue. You know, I'd gone all the way the other side of the world to get as much out of that conference as I could. So from a selfish perspective, I don't want these other things to get in the way. But at the same time, they scream so loud, saying, this is a problem. But then another part of me is going, I'm a little child, I don't know what to do. So your coping mechanism is kind of to push it out of sight. And this is the story with avoidance strategies, okay? What's going on with avoidance strategies? Well, at least I think, okay? And I'm kind of straying now into Gabor Mate territory, but I think it's very, very valid. There are parts of us that are not to be spoken about. Shameful, painful. You know, we all have our own compartmentalized experiences, and there are certain things that we just don't like to go there. It's easier to avoid. And depending upon the level of pain will depend upon the level of avoidance strategy that you use, or that you have experiences in the past that seem to work. And they never really work, so you always need more of them. But for one person it's shopping, for another it's sex addiction, for another it's alcohol, for another it's hallucinogens, for another it's fentanyl, for another it's finding things on the internet that prove they're right or prove they're wrong. You know, everybody has their drug of choice, and none of them work, because by definition it's impossible to get enough of something that doesn't work. You know, the way an addiction works is that during the time of acquisition of the thing that you are addicted to, that is this uncontrollable desire, you forget about your source of pain. But then the minute that you actually acquire the addictive thing, unfortunately reality floods back down. The pain returns, the shame returns, whatever it may be, plus you add on the shame of the addiction on top. So in actual fact, avoiding compounds the problem that was originally there. You double down. And it seems as if this is a culture-wide phenomenon. This is the massive problem. Okay, so everybody in the world appears to be self-soothing, and this is where we end up getting onto politics and capitalism, because it appears as if it is culture which is headlong, blindfold, walking further and further down this approach, and you can see the schisms appearing. You know, your Extinction Rebellion, and you say no to oil protests. The naysayers or pro-sayers of global warming. The extreme opinions that come on the internet, where people are so determined to defend their particular position. I mean, it's another form of denying reality, right? We're all at it, is what I'm trying to say. You know, there are degrees of trauma, but to the individual, no matter what their level of trauma is, it's for them it's real and big, because they haven't experienced anything further. We have learned shame. We've learned that there are parts of us that are unacceptable in some way or other, socially unacceptable, whatever it may be. And so we crack ourselves into pieces in a coping mechanism which doesn't work very well, and so we self-soothe. Different people self-soothe with different drugs of choice from something that has worked for them in the past, but none of them work. And it appears as if we're going further and further down that route, which is a tragic conclusion to come to. Capitalism sets man against man. There is a winner and there is a loser. This is a massive, massive system which it's overwhelming to even comprehend. We have so many role models which seem to, or who seem to succeed based upon denial. Our world, our messages are so filtered. They don't resemble reality. Everything has been photoshopped. The unpalatable parts have been edited out. Notice I'm not doing any editing on these videos. But if at the heart of it all is a need to pacify the parts of us that are in pain, the parts of us that are somehow shameful. And shame is an amazing thing, okay? Because if something is shameful, it is taboo, it is not to be spoken about. And if it's not to be spoken about, it's damned hard to fix. The individual solution to the need for these avoidance strategies is to stop avoiding, okay? Because no matter how much you avoid, it doesn't work. The pain is compounded, and so the need to avoid becomes stronger. So you're either going to reach a point where internally you fracture, or something externally yells loud enough that you are forced to pay attention. And similarly, what goes on at the individual level is also occurring at a cultural level. Be that on a political level or an experiential level or a meaning-making level. What is societally acceptable and not acceptable, desirable, and so on. We come to interpretations which maintain the level of pain that we can tolerate, unfortunately, seems to be the way that it works. But the solution at the individual level is to dive inside the pain, okay? If you can't fix the solution from outside through self-pacifying, all of our interpretations, all of the stories running inside of our head are coming from our choices, okay? Conscious or subconscious. If we bring those back up to a state of where we can reevaluate them, well, then we can examine them, see if they're relevant, truthful. If they're ours, if we inherited them, if we interpreted them, misinterpreted them, or even correctly interpreted a situation in which we had no control and had to fit into, look at systems theory for this. The end result is we end up with a set of meanings inside of us which force us to not exhibit an element of ourselves, and then we go down this pacifying approach, because it turns out this part of us is a real part of us. This is where you end up with the whole kind of owning your shadow approach. Now, it's hard to go from the individual to everybody. And I'm not really sure what the solution is on this approach. I wish I did, and if I did, then I probably wouldn't need to be doing this video, okay? But for me, there is an element of step by step, one by one. If we can make people understand what is going on inside of themselves, so that they can take responsibility for their own experience and no longer be afraid of the parts of themselves that are painful, to lean into it and understand it rather than to run away and find a pacifying strategy. Every person that does that has a ripple effect upon everybody else. You know, we've been talking for as long as I can seem to understand about an awakening of society. You know, certainly since the 70s onwards we've been talking about this. I'm no expert on the matter, but I imagine before that we were talking about it. But it seems to have gathered momentum since maybe the 60s or so, this grand awakening of people. There must be a more realistic way. But the thing is, if you can make the change inside of yourself, personally you benefit massively, okay? In a way that any amount of self-pacifying or addictive behavior is not going to work anyway. So from an individual perspective, it works. You end up being a happier person. You become a kinder person. You start to understand your fellow man in a more compassionate way. And then that has ripple effects upon society. You know, one of the extreme examples of capitalism is this massive, massive inequality that it creates. Now we know, we've got lots of data that shows that once an individual earns more than, the last figure I saw was about $70,000 a year. If you earn more than $70,000 a year, there is no impact whatsoever on your happiness from an increase in income. This is illuminating, okay? If you look at the level of inequality, I mean, let's make it easy, right? Let's say if you're earning more than $1 million, maybe you want to consider your avoidance strategies because there is a story running inside of your head. But we can go down to the point of, if you're earning more than $70,000 a year, consider what it is that you're avoiding. Right? Or we can go down the route of Maslow's human needs, you know, like you need your security, you need your home and so on, and then eventually it gets to the point where you have no need for any more money. Things won't make you happier once you've got your basic needs covered. And this is so massive, it's so culturally pervasive that it's impossible to get your head around, never mind to make changes about. But individually, if we make changes, we make momentum which impacts the generally understood truths. I guess that's all I kind of have to say about this. Okay? It's a personal journey which has a ripple effect, a beneficial ripple effect, potentially upon society, potentially upon culture. You know, because if we can see all of everything fearlessly, even the things that we dislike or disagree with, and we can see that from a position of compassion and kindness rather than judgment. If we can understand what it is that makes us what we are, and therefore what makes other people come to the choices that they have come to, and that, you know, to bang on with my old cliche, but for the grace of God, go I. We're not compounding somebody else's shame and stigma when they are suffering. And that has personal benefits and it has societal benefits, because people who are not suffering will not themselves need to self-soothe with their drug of choice. And when it comes to extremely addictive substances that they are kind of out of control with, we can be supportive to that rather than penalizing it. We can be sympathetic and help them out of a situation rather than using it as an example to make everybody else work harder. We can start to, starting with ourselves, bring about a kinder, safer world. And I know that sounds very idealistic, and I know that there's a lot of people going to laugh about it. But I kind of don't see a solution, okay? We cannot continue as a world the way we are, right? Because it doesn't work. It never did work. It's a temporary solution that, even in the temporary moment, isn't a solution. You know, I hate to bang on about it, but you cannot get enough of something that doesn't work. It's just that it seems so overwhelming that it seems easier to continue down that path even though it doesn't work. It's like the guy who's searching underneath the streetlight for his keys, the drunk guy. He's lost his keys, he can't get in the house, and he's searching underneath the streetlight. And the reason he's searching underneath the streetlight, because there's a light there, so he can look there. But he's pretty sure his keys aren't there. His keys are over on the other side, but there's no light there, you know, so it's easier to look under the light. I kind of get the feeling that it's a bit like that, you know, we begin that route with avoidance strategies, and then they take a grip over us, and then we become impoverished, we become weak, we submit, we start to tell ourselves stories that we are like that. You know, some of these chemical substances particularly are very, very addictive. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And the more that society punishes people's shame, the more inclined they are to go down that route, and the more they are inclined to need it. If we can abandon shame, the need for those avoidance strategies would well, certainly diminish, maybe disappear. And that's not to say that I hate shame, okay? There is a very useful thing about shame. You know, there's a very useful thing about having a sense of shyness or a sense of embarrassment. It's a good emotion. All emotions are neutral in actual fact. They're all just what they are. It's a way of preserving our self, maintaining our survival, effectively. So it's not that there's anything wrong with shame per se, but when shame becomes toxic and it drives us into these avoidance strategies, it's detrimental to us as individuals, and it's detrimental to society. And that's what I'm trying to identify and bring you solutions. And the solution, it all goes back to the same thing that I keep trapping out about the considered life, about re-examining your truths, your sense of identity, your sense of the stories running inside of your head. Are they real? Are they real? Even if they feel real, the idea of trying something else can regenerate your sense of what you are capable of and what the world is capable of. Okay, now we're starting to spread into the other elements, and I've got other videos on that. So I will shut up at that point, but thank you for watching. I hope that wasn't too miserable. You know, my end solution is deal with your stuff yourself, love yourself like your whole life depends upon it. Consider that whatever you are going through, everybody else can go through, that they are going to come to conclusions which are different to yours, but they're valid to themselves, and that therefore that kindness that you can bring to yourself, that you can bring to your fellow man, can end up with a massive, massive beneficial effect, personally and culturally. And that if we don't kind of do that, everybody's suffering. And eventually, if we continue down this route, the suffering will become so large, it will scream in everybody's face so loud that we have no choice but to pay attention. And I'm hoping that by individually and culturally bringing this sort of thing out into the open, we might get there without having to go through that catastrophe. Thank you for watching. I hope it resonates. This is just a little guy talking about something to the best of his ability. And it might be right, it might be wrong. But it feels important. Thank you for watching. If you have any thoughts, if you have any comments, send them down before. If you have requests, if you have questions, ask. My goal of this is for everybody to be kinder and nicer to themselves and to other people. To get out of our own way, to stop shooting all over ourselves, to stop judging, to stop moralizing, and to love. It seems as if that is the meaning of life. It's to love, it's to care, it's to kindness. Kindness always wins. Whether you think in karmatic terms or not. Okay, I'll shut up. I hope that's interesting. Take care. Bye-bye.